Bien, bonjour à tous, bienvenue au Centre de recherche Culture, Art, Société. Je suis Célia Forger, la coordonnatrice scientifique du CELAT, au nom de mon directeur Jean-François Gauvin, qui n'a pas pu être présent ce matin, mais on voulait vous souhaiter la bienvenue. Remercier Hiroki d'être parmi nous ce matin, et Mathieu, qui a fait le déplacement jusqu'à Québec pour être avec nous. La conférence va être en anglais, so the presentation will be in English, but I just want to say a few words in French from the beginning. Je voulais remercier Danielle Bélanger, qui est titulaire de la Chaire de recherche du Canada en dynamiques migratoires, qui est l'organisatrice en fait de cette conférence aujourd'hui. Agnès Blé, qui est la coordonnatrice scientifique de la Chaire, pour avoir tout organisé aujourd'hui. Puis je voulais remercier Marie-Christine Lambert-Perrault, ma collègue au CELAT, qui est en ligne avec nous et qui gère la conférence en ligne. Et j'ai juste vu dans les participants Marie Cortella. So hi Marie, nice to meet you again in this presentation. I know the subject will be a pleasure for you. Donc, je passe de suite la parole à Daniel pour cette conférence. Donc, Daniel, je t'en prie, tiens, je te donne le micro. Si tu veux que les gens te voient, par contre, en ligne, il faudrait mieux que tu te déplaces. Ouais.
Ici, c'est bon, donc, bonjour tout le monde, en ligne et en présence. Merci d'être ici à ce moment de la session où on est occupé. Donc, Hiroki Igarashi, qui est avec nous à la Chaire de recherche du Canada sur les dynamiques migratoires mondiales depuis septembre dernier, qui est professeur invité. Donc, c'était vraiment un plaisir pour nous de pouvoir l'accueillir toute l'année, pendant son année sabbatique à Québec. Et donc, aujourd'hui, c'est un peu sa présentation de l'année où il va partager avec nous une partie de ses travaux. Il est déjà intervenu dans un cours à l'automne dernier et les étudiants ont pu profiter de son expertise. Donc, Hiroki est à la Graduate School of Global and Transdisciplinary Studies à l'Université Chiba au Japon. Il est titulaire d'un doctorat en sociologie de l'Université d'Hawaï. Il travaille sur la migration des élites, la migration aussi pour les études transnationales. Et donc, aujourd'hui, il va nous parler de ses travaux les plus récents. Et on a parlé avec Hiroki de qui on pourrait inviter pour partager un peu ses réflexions à la fois sur ses travaux et ceux d'Hiroki et par les miens. Donc, Matthew Haynes de l'Université Saint-Thomas au Nouveau-Brunswick. On est super content. Il a fait la route, comme disait Célia, en voiture, samedi pour éviter la tempête. Et Mathieu, lui, est titulaire d'une chaire de recherche du Canada aussi. Je ne sais pas comment en français tu l'as traduit, études mondiales et transnationales?
Oui.
OK, d'accord. Global and Transnational Studies. Donc, vraiment des atomes crochus ici entre nos deux invités, la migration sur les retraités des pays du Nord qui vont vers le Sud. Pas toujours parce qu'ils sont forcément pas du tout dans l'esprit parce qu'ils sont plus riches, mais plutôt parce qu'ils ont pas toujours de l'argent pour vivre. Donc, on va parler même de migrants économiques, même réfugiés économiques. Certains vont s'appeler comme ça, donc c'est super intéressant. Son livre, c'est Gringolandia, Lifestyle Migration Under Late Capitalism, de l'Université Minnesota en 2008. Et ça repose sur une étude sur la ville de Cuenca, en Équateur, où j'ai moi-même habité en 1990-91. On en discutait juste avant. Puis je souligne la présence aussi avec nous de Giovanni Mauro de l'Italie, qui est arrivé ce matin à l'Université Laval, il y a quelques jours à Québec, qui visite l'Université Laval toute la semaine dans le cadre d'une entente Erasmus+, entre son université et la nôtre. Son université, c'est Campagna Luigi Madritelli, en Italie. Donc, il assiste à notre présentation. Donc, je vous souhaite une beau séminaire. On va avoir évoqué environ 30 minutes et par la suite, Mathieu, 30 minutes et une période de discussion pour 1h30 au total.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup pour cette présentation. Before starting my presentation, I'd like to express my gratitude to each and every one of you attending here today face-to-face and also online. Particularly, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to Danielle, who generously hosted me as a visiting scholar here at the University Laval for a year. And also, I would like to express my deep appreciation to Matthew, a discussant of this conference, to travel all the way from the New Brunswick. On my first day to come to this campus, Agnes took me to this department, and then I met Danielle, and Danielle kindly told me, okay, I'll help you to get connected to migration scholar while you are here. And then when I told about this, Matthew just popped up in my mind. So I'm glad that this opportunity happened. So thank you very much for making this happen. Danielle and also Celia and Agnes and other people who are involved in this. So thank you very much. So I'm looking forward to learning, also sharing my idea. I was learning and also discussing and growing together with all of you today. And I said this is an ongoing project, and this is the tentative presentation, a title of the presentation. But looking at analyzing this data more and more, I thought this title is a bit better. So the title is changed: the stepwise lifestyle migration via the global south, the interplay of lifestyle and educational aspirations of Japanese families in Malaysia. So let's get started. All right. So, okay, here. All right, so depending on where we live in the world, so patterns of migration that we see is quite different. So based on this figure, the number of international migrants by regions, from here, we can see that the people are migrating from here, top to the bottom. Then we can see that from here, Europe and also North America, major kind of countries to accept the migrants. Then after you look at the data, Europe, European countries do not accept many people from North America, but North America accept people from various regions. So in that way, North America can be kind of seen as kind of final destination of international migration. But today, my presentation is not about this kind of major trend of international migration, but rather this movement of people from global north to global south. And next one. So this is another figure, which is a bit old, that's from 2015. So this is also to show where people move from which region to which region. So this shows that people from Asia, so more like regional mobility, or in Europe to Europe. So regional mobility is quite popular actually from this type of data. What I'm going to talk about today is regional mobility from Japan to Malaysia, and then where those Japanese migrants who migrate to Malaysia want to migrate next. So it's kind of onward mobility or migration. Okay, so the north-south migration that's kind of private mobility, because this type of research has been, of course, not the mainstream, this was conducted in mainstream kind of migration research, but was conducted various scholars. So I thought this Bauman's discussion mobility was, I think, quite the kind of influential, I thought. So he introduced highly increasing freedom of mobility as a new polarization. So he introduced the concept of tourists versus the vagabonds. So the tourists are basically the affluent, middle-class people from developed countries who move because they want to. But on the other hand, the vagabonds move because they have to move because of their the environment that they are not able to bear. So there are two types of people who are on the move. And then we've seen the emerging research on privileged mobility. And first one is more mobile professionals, expats. But then the discussion was more on the kind of practice of migrants, for example, right-side migration. And then the post-colonial approach is more introduced to the migration of people from global north to global south, more in this kind of study of kind of flightiness of migration. And Fetcher and Walsh said how racial hierarchies and power inequality persist, as well as how they are being configured and challenged in this process of kind of flightiness of migration. This type of research is quite interesting. At the same time, I think the case of Japan can also a little bit add to this type of discussion because of racially Japan is not considered as white nation, but at the same time it's part of global north. And why do people in the global north migrate to the global south? Then Matthew nicely discussed this concept in his various work. He used this concept of this geo-arbitrage life cycle event of corporate offshoring. So basically, those who migrate from global north to global south rely on income from these high latitudes of global division of labor. Then they spend in this lower latitude global this global division of labor, so that they are able to make ends meet, and they also can realize that an ideal type of lifestyle that kind of generated in their own kind of host in their own kind of country that they grew up and spend their time. So by looking at this literature on this transnational migration, or particularly this elite mobility or privileged mobility, I came to find a gap. So firstly, this kind of lifestyle migration literature, which is the kind of major definition is here. It's basically this migration of relatively affluent individuals moving either part-time or a full-time, permanently or remote, temporarily to places which, for various reasons, signify for migrants something loosely defined as quality of life. And this type of research was found from north to north or north to south migration, but I didn't find much discussion on onward one. So after they migrate from people from global north migrated to another country, then it seems like the discussion is often like they end, but I'm not sure where they end up to after. And particularly maybe for retirement migration, maybe they are less likely to move to another place, maybe, I don't know. But then I look at the onward migration, so which is defined as partially trajectory that involves extended stays in 2 or more destination countries. Then this type of research was more discussed in this context of intra-EU mobility of citizens born outside of Europe. But still, it's more south-north migration. Or from the context of Asia, this concept of stepwise migration in and also from Asia. But then here, kind of they focus more on kind of a flow of migration from different countries. At the same time, they often talk about economic migrants or refugees. So they're not talking much about the affluent individuals onward migration via global south from global north. So my question is, why and how do relatively privileged migration from the global north generate the transnational pathway via the global south? So that's kind of a more theoretical kind of question. And my case, it's again, I said that it's a case of Japanese families moving to Malaysia, but that's originally this case was embedded in this literature of East Asian transnational migration research that kind of started more from the late 1990s. It's kind of a trend that's basically captured many scholars' attention of mother-child transnational migration from East Asia to Western Anglophone countries. I'm sorry to include Canada as Western Anglophone because it's a Francophone country as well. But then this type of trend was practiced by many Chinese family and Korean families, and also Taiwanese or case from Hong Kong. And then Yo and others said that this is type of transnational family strategy is to enhance the overall well-being or status of the family in response to changing circumstances. And then often their narratives are often like more education-oriented and particularly mothers to sacrifice themselves for the child's education. But using the case of Hawaii, I said that the Japanese case in Hawaii can be understood more not only for education purpose, but also parents, particularly mothers' lifestyle reason, because they wanted to be away from domestic social constraints in Japan for various reasons. So then I actually wrote a paper on Japanese families migration in Malaysia. And this trend is actually was studied from 2012. It's basically relatively affluent Japanese families migrating Malaysia for the child's international education because of the rise of international school industry in the world and the cost of it, the education for international education is quite reasonable from this perspective of people in Japan. then although it's called the education migration in Japanese term, I interviewed people and I found out that the reason for them to migrate to Malaysia was not simply just education reason, but quite diverse. For example, including lifestyle purpose for their parents, investment purpose because of this condominiums, and also this investment boom in Malaysia, and it was early retirement also, and the education is quite mixed. So for the case-oriented question I would like to investigate for this ongoing project is, how do Japanese families utilize Malaysia as a migration site for their children? And how does staying in Malaysia generate new mobility patterns for Japanese families? So the last study was more for parents, how they think about their own reason of migrating to Malaysia, but more this time focus on children, how parents think of children's needs in Malaysia, and then where do they want to go after? So that's the two research questions from my case. And for this reason, I have interviewed 47 Japanese families from 2016 to 2023. And then I also conducted 8 follow-up interviews. Also did all the other like observations, for example, attending migration seminars conducted in Japan. I also interviewed for school principals of international schools, and I also interviewed those who are in the migration industry. And I interviewed people who live in these 3 cities, Southern Johor, Penang, Kuala Lumpur, which I will show you in a minute. And then the forms of migration is quite diverse, but the 2/3 of migrants are mother-child type. And then the 2 parents are more the next dominant pattern. And father-child, which is quite rare, but the kind of increasing pattern. And the most interesting was grandmother and child, and the grandmother and mother and child. So these are all the cases. All right, and then the class backgrounds based on what I observed, it's basically a majority of them are more like petit bourgeoisie, more small or mid-sized business owners. So this is not the type of practice that actually the general middle class people can do. Although it has been advertised that Malaysia is actually a reasonable place to migrate for Japanese families. So let me just introduce some context of Malaysia. Right, okay, from Japan. So when it comes to this migration trend from Japan, firstly, Japanese corporations started, to explore their business opportunity in the world since 1960. They're starting in Asia. So in Malaysia, there are actually many Japanese corporations. So that's why there is a trend of Japanese expatriate families migrating to Malaysia since the 1960s. And also from around the same time, just the travel, many people able to travel for touristic reasons from Japan. And then from the literature of this migration research, from the 1990s, what we actually see was from the narratives of escape from Japanese women, particularly moving to Western Anglophone countries because of this patriarchal gender relations in Japan. That's why they wanted to be free from Japan. And then the other one is also family well-being as well. And the one is Japanese retirement migration from Japan to Malaysia. And then what I observed so far is the well-being is achieved for not only for parents but also for children, for both, trying to realize the 2 types of well-being for children and parents. And also one was emerged after actually 2011, actually the March 11th today, 13 years ago. That was because of the earthquake that hit the northern part of Japan. And because of the tsunami and also radiation and earthquake, but particularly the skilled, educated individuals came to be more aware of the risk of being in Japan. That's why the Oishi and Hamada actually investigated this case of the skilled workers from Japan to Australia. And because they are aware of this, the educated individuals are more aware of a concern about the future of Japan. Then from the context, Malaysia, Malaysia is population of 33 million. And also nation ethnography. So it's a citizen workforce into three categorize themselves at birth into racial groups: Malays, Muslim, Chinese, Indians, and others. Also, it's important to share this colonial history of Malaysia. So European colonizer Malaya was Portuguese, Dutch, and the British. And also Japan ruled Malaysia from 1942 to 1945. At the same time, when in the process of modernization of Malaysia, Japan kind of modeled Japan in this name of Look East policy, because this Malaysia tried to kind of learn Japan's economic miracle. This then Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. So that's according to the general population of Malaysia have a favorable image toward Japan, even according to the statistics. And also, Malaysia hosted the previous migrants particularly from Global North, the famous program, MM2H program, just to, as long as you have, prepay enough amount of money to the bank and you are allowed to live in Malaysia for example, 10 years or so. And then that recently, digital nomad visa was introduced as well. All right, so then this is Malaysia, and so people migrate from Japan to Malaysia, and this is a Malay. Well, there's also another region of Malaysia on the right side, but I did a data collection in the southern Johor, right next to Singapore, and also Kuala Lumpur, and also the Penang, the Georgetown. So Georgetown is more famous for like a resort area, as it's well known. And southern Johor was actually not so much for Japanese community didn't exist, but from 2012. This place took attention for Japanese families. All right, okay. Then this is the blog of the migration agent that promoted the education migration from 2012. And she said, actually here, this is translation. I like Hawaii, but my preference changed. Education migration, mother-child migration from to Johor Bahru, Malaysia. Mother-child migration without husband to Johor Bahru to protect children from Japan's cramming and school-based education. So this kind of framing was quite interesting because till then, Malaysia was, Hawaii was considered as a major kind of destination for Japanese families, but she shifted this attention from Hawaii to Malaysia. Well, then she recognized, I like Hawaii, but I wasn't able to make it. But, the Johor Bahru is an interesting place to go. And also, so migrant agent like she promote Malaysia, and there are several kind of keywords, kind of key aspects. So it's the site to provide international education with affordable cost. And children can learn not only English but also Chinese, which is a kind of rising hegemonic language in the world. And children can learn about ethnic diversity. Appropriate first place for families' future international migration. Tropical climate, and spacious and comfortable housing environment, because Japan's housing situation is quite small. That's why people in Japan actually enjoy spacious living condition in Malaysia. And then you feel richer because of this price differences between Japan and Malaysia. And also you can get to know affluent families from other countries. So it's kind of a social network component. And you feel confident to live as Japanese, which is, I'll talk to you later about this. Okay, let me just skip this part. And this is a picture of Malaysia, some photos. This is a picture from Penang. So it's known as a resort place, but as you can see, lots of high-rise condominiums built. And then my colleagues, actually, I have colleagues who works in university in this Penang, and she said that many local people commute outside of the island because of the fact that these condominiums really for affluent migrants, not only from Japan or from China, but also from Singapore and so forth. And the other photo on the right is actually the view from Singapore. If you cross the border, this type of high-rise condominium are welcoming you. So just let me talk about kind of a structure of what structural component of Malaysia. So the reason one is people that attract many Japanese family is because of this expansion of international school. And particularly the unique thing about Malaysia's international school is that they offer Chinese as a second language, as a foreign language. So children, actually parents from various countries actually are attracted to this type of value, not only to English, but also Chinese, with two hegemonic languages in the world. And also growing investment, migration, mobility was also common in this past 15 years or so because of the economic development and rapid urbanization. Many high-rise condominiums being built, and then many mediators are trying to promote this property tourism and investment migration. And some of my interviewees actually were attracted to Malaysia first by this property reason. Then they were informed that, oh, there's an international school being built as well. Okay, why not we migrate? Then some schools are, for example, the famous boardings from UK. So it's more a connection with the UK education systems. So now let's move on to the background exam. So let's move on to this first question. How do Japanese families utilize Malaysia as a migration site for their children? So I'd like to talk first about push factors. Why say, we can't ignore simply this, we can't ignore push components. One is the education problem of Japan. Many parents mention about the problem of school bullying and truancy, and parents are not able to adjust, that their children were not able to adjust to Japanese school. That's why they sought something alternative outside of Japan. So migration agent A said that at the migration seminar, we received many comments from other mothers whose children were stressed at school in Japan and stopped going to school. And the disaster risk, the same with the existing literature. Many people actually thought about migrating to other countries after the Great Tohoku earthquake and tsunami and the radiation problem. And also economic and pension risks. So one is the 12 million yen pension problem. So Japanese government announced that actually the pension is going to not be good enough in the future. They warn people in Japan to prepare more money before retirement. That shocked many people. So that's why Miss Ogawa said, my husband wondered if we can survive in this decline in Japan. He feels a sense of crisis in Japan now and in the future. He is concerned about economy, education, and the pension. All right. And also, this is something that I also discussed in my previous publication. But the parents' narrative said what's good about Malaysia for their children is obtaining English Chinese as global cultural capital. And also, children can obtain kind of cosmopolitan orientation. For example, this Mr. Takano said, there were Indian kids, Chinese kids, and Kazakh kids in my neighborhood. My son often play with them. They eat different food depending on their religions. When I cook and serve food, they said, I can't eat this or I can't eat that. Then my son told me, Mom, he can't eat beef because he's Indian. Furthermore, he said, pizza is the only thing we can all eat. My son understood everybody's religion and asked himself, then what is the only thing we can all eat? I thought this way of thinking was very wonderful. So she was kind of appreciating the fact that the children learning such cultural differences and trying to model themselves nicely. And then the other one is a narrative of safe Malaysia, referring to Western Anglophone countries. So when they talk about how good Malaysia is for children, they emphasize more economic, racial distance and linguistic barriers of north-to-north migration from Japan. So Ms. Nagatomo said, I heard that you might face racial discrimination in the US if you cannot speak English properly. I chose Malaysia because it's easier for my husband to come here from Japan, and Malaysians are very kind. So I thought it would be a very good place for my children to learn English, and also the cost of living is reasonable. So here it's United States is considered as kind of dangerous, a risky place to go, but Malaysia is not a safe place to come. But at the same time, when Japanese migrants are aware of the risk of Malaysia, because children, the parents know that everybody told me there's a risk that children can be kidnapped by some local people, although it happened, but not too frequently. But although they talk about the risk of Malaysia, when talk about student education, they said that this is better than in the other Western Anglophone countries. So Ms. Hannah said, everyone here is Asian with same skin, hair, and eye color. In the US, whites are superior. But when I went to Southeast Asia, I feel good about myself because people respect Japan. This feeling made me feel I would migrate to Malaysia with my children. So this is kind of we use the same but different, but I'm more privileged. So this is kind of can be considered more as privileged kind of migration. And also let me continue. This narrative was safe Malaysia. So some parents said that the Malaysia is a place where people can be proud of themselves as Japanese. Because Malaysia is a Japan-friendly country compared to other countries. For example, what they often mention is like, for example, South Korea or China. So the father said, people respect Japan a lot, saying Japan has amazing technology and it's a wonderful country. Also, when I took a taxi, Malay driver told me, thank you for fighting for us during World War II. Japan helped Malaysia gain independence. I feel that this kind of experience is very good for my children to develop a sense of pride in being Japanese. Then his wife continued, but Malay people are positive. Some Chinese everyday people told us Japanese soldiers killed my relatives. Then he responded, it's a good opportunity to think beyond a sense of guilt and shame from defeatism after World War II, isn't it? So this is an interesting narrative because Japan's memory of losing the war made the people in Japan think that we should not repeat the same thing. Often there's public discourse is not to be proud of themselves as Japanese because that could be a risk to transform them into more nationalistic Japan. So they are saying that he is saying that actually it's a positive side that we can learn from Malaysia and we can be proud of themselves as Japanese. Okay, so let's move on to the second question. How does staying in Malaysia generate new mobility patterns for Japanese families? So often many parents said that Malaysia is a first step for transnational journeys. And I think it's a kind of concept of mobility capital can be quite useful to understand what a kind of a process for them to kind of think about where they want to go. So the Moritz kind of definition of mobility capital is basically that mobility capital allows some people to cross borders rather easily, to feel comfortable and carry out activities in different places, and to come back again. It is thus constituted by the accumulation of past experience of movement, on the other hand, potential for future movements. So many parents said that they are too scared they are not confident to move to, for example, Hawaii because of their English and lack of experience. So even migration agents said that for Japanese people who have an inferiority complex about their English, Malaysia can be a great place to start up because it's a place where you can gain confidence. And then Mr. Machida said, it's kind of the same thing. This place is important first step in the long run. Many people directly migrate to Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, which I found pretty difficult. Then actually, he went to Australia with his friends, male friends, whom he met in Malaysia. They play golf together in Australia. They decided to migrate. He decided to migrate to Australia after with his son. So this is kind of experiment for them. He gained network with other people. Then he feels that, okay, I can make it to Australia. So he gained confidence by staying in Malaysia. And also from children's perspective, parents said this is a good preparation. Malaysia is a good site to prepare children to move on to the global world. So Ms. Izumi said, what I like about Asia is that I think it's good for children the education. Usually people go to America or Hawaii children, I feel that they might not be treated kindly. There might be discrimination. That's why I would like the children to be exposed to Asia where there are many people of different ethnic groups and to develop the ability to argue without being intimidated before they go outside. The outside means outside of Asia. So in this also narrative as well, the kind of West is kind of also imagined as kind of outside, also somewhere, the area that the children should also go and challenge in the future. And then based on the interviews, the types of mobility patterns that I identify, for example, return mobility, global mobility, and regional mobility. At the same time, this idea of where they want to go next change often, and it's not like it decided from the beginning. So it's changed over time. So when it comes to return mobility and beyond, for example, many families go back to Japan, but some reasons are children difficulty adjusting to schools in Malaysia, or children's preference for moving on to Japanese school after they finish, for example, first elementary kind of the primary education in Malaysia, then they move back to Japan. Also, some decided to move back to Japan because of the fact that children are losing Japanese language skill. But some aim to go back to Malaysia. So in a way, although they go back to Japan, some of them are still kind of want to continue their international journey somehow. And the global mobility, I found two patterns. It's basically education-oriented. That was more like considered by affluent mother-child migrants. So Matsudo said that from Malaysia, I want my son to go to Singapore, Canadian boarding middle school first. Then I would like him to move on to America, Canadian or Japanese boarding high school, and then if possible, American university, preferably the one on the top school in the US. So she's pretty ambitious. But at the same time, there's also another component, lifestyle-oriented one. For example, Ms. Mochida said, the main reason I wanted to go abroad was not because of my child education. It was my dream to live abroad. My first requirement was to live in the town where I could see the ocean. Then she wanted to go to, like, for example, California, all that stuff, but she thought it was difficult. Then she chose Penang as at the very end. But she said, I want to move to Australia in the future, but my children will decide if we want to go there or not. So it's really, she has a desire to go, but it's really up to her children as well. So it's all kind of negotiation of lifestyle and education, and including children preferences. And this previous mobility was quite common, but now I came to find more emerging kind of regional mobility. It's because, firstly, this easing family mobility within Asia is quite become easy because of this prevalence of international schools. So it's easy to change school because other countries offer a guardian visa for their children, for their parents. So Ms. Hannah said, I've heard that many people go to Australia from here, and that it was wonderful natural environment, similar to here. It's a comfortable place to live. So I'm a little interested in now. But she ended up moving to Thailand. Because she found suitable international school for her children. And then also another one that I found these days is that some parents are actually trying to find a way to move to Chinese-speaking region because of the fact that their children are learning Chinese as second language, and their skills, they feel like their children's Chinese skill are quite high. So this is a although some people have negative impression toward China, but some families are more have a positive impression to China, and then they are also consider this regional mobility to Chinese-speaking region. So wrapping up, I'm sorry, already 33 minutes has passed. So the first question, how do Japanese families utilize Malaysia as a migration site for their children? Is the place where children can gain global cultural capital, cosmopolitan orientation, and they feel Malaysia is safe because children can benefit privilege from post-colonial, post-war legacies because Japanese are well respected. Well, not always, but that's kind of general trend that the interview said. And how does staying in Malaysia generate new mobility pattern for Japanese families? So the key was again kind of mobility capital, could experience of living in a foreign country. So accumulate linguistic skills, able to English a little bit better than before, knowledge of how things are like in other countries, and also confidence to live in overseas, and the kind of gain network to with people who live outside of Japan. Then they imagine and generate the different types of mobility patterns. And then just practice by following and negotiating lifestyle education aspirations. Then lastly, theoretical contribution. So initially I said there's a gap in the onward and lifestyle migration literature. And the case of Japan, it's quite interesting because this is the case of previous mobility from Japan, the racial and linguistically peripheries of global north. And in this context, role of mobility capital is quite important. So I think that this Japanese families migration in Malaysia can be and beyond can be understood as stepwise lifestyle migration. And then to update this idea of the stepwise migration, I'd like to refer to Andrew Mary Paul's stepwise migration concept. So the Paul actually defined this mobility pattern to refer to the onward economic migrants. So the definition is here. The pattern of multi-stage international labor migration involving stints of substantive duration working intermediate countries as an international strategy adopted by low capital migrants unable to gain immediate entry into their preferred destination countries. So to update, but I think it's better to call this as stepwise economic migration possibly. Then to answer lastly the theoretical question I wanted to investigate, why and how do relatively privileged migrants from global north generate their transnational pathway via the global south? My answer can be kind of introduced this concept of stepwise lifestyle migration. This is long, but let me just say. So stepwise lifestyle migration is a pattern of relatively affluent people from developed countries with little mobility capital, but a desire for international experience, starting from low-cost, low-risk country, is seeking staged lifestyle migration regionally and or globally by following their educational and lifestyle aspirations, while gaining knowledge, skills, confidence, and network to continue the transnational journeys comfortably. Well, I feel like I'm reading Bourdieu's like sentence. And merci, thank you, and ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Hiroki, for that very interesting presentation. And I also, like you, want to say thank you to Danielle and Agnes for organizing this. I'm really honored to be here to talk about your work, which I've known for a number of years also. So it's nice actually to meet in person and exchange. And, you know, this is the first time basically since the pandemic that I've been able to go anywhere other than online to talk about my work. And it's also really fun to have been able to drive here. Normally from Fredericton, I have to take a plane somewhere. And that's not very practical for coming to Quebec City. It's probably the same distance and time-wise. So I've organized my my notes, my comments around two main issues. I guess firstly talking about a discussion of Hiroki's work, and particularly this work, and then also thinking about where to situate this work within the broader field of lifestyle migration scholarship. So firstly, of course, as Hiroki has pointed out, the contribution here is to think about onward migration, which he correctly notes is underdeveloped in the literature. There are some cases of north to south onward migration, but there's not a lot, and we can talk a little bit about that later. So I think that there's something to be done there in terms of thinking about how these types of migration have been organized for some time, but also how they're changing. So, you know, the idea, for instance, that there is a low-risk country like Malaysia that one can kind of get one's feet wet is perhaps a contemporary, you know, I hear a dialogue actually with my own parents' vacation plans of going maybe to the Caribbean, and they'll start in this place, and then, you know, they'll see from there how comfortable they are with going to places that maybe seem more adventurous. So I think that that's a really interesting way of exploring how the pursuit of cosmopolitan cultural capital is changing also as time goes on. There's also, of course, the decision to view these types of migrations within a lifestyle migration lens in Asia. And I think that's quite interesting. One of the questions that I have about it is what shows up when you do that? What shows up from a Japanese angle, but also for the field writ large? What are some of the questions that show up when we start thinking about these privileged forms of migration from a lifestyle migration lens? I mean, one of the things that you highlight in your work is the pursuit of freedom from status hierarchies in Japan as being the thing that justifies locating this type of migration and lifestyle migration. So I think that that's interesting. And you're doing this, you know, in relation to expanding the category of educational migration. And I think that that's very interesting because what we're doing here, and I'll speak a little bit more about that, is thinking about what work are the categories doing sociologically. How does it also code the way that we as sociologists are thinking about these types of migrations, these types of movements? I also obviously really appreciated the attention here to gender and also the way that you're attending to gender. So there have been in lifestyle migration scholarship a lot of people who have, well, I also think that this is an area in lifestyle migration that hasn't been overexplored. So it's interesting, but what I think is really interesting in what you're doing is you're attending to the gender patterns in the migration itself. So the migration itself is gendered, whereas a lot of the other studies that I've seen attend to the discourses or experiences of particular genders within this migration experience. And that's a little bit different in your work, and I think that it's interesting. And then, of course, the stuff that I've really liked about your work for a long time is your attention to Bourdieusian concepts of cultural capital and cosmopolitanism. And this is something that I hope to dialogue with you a little bit more, because I've also been thinking about cosmopolitanism and some of the critiques within that literature around whether it's just cultural capital. You know, I'm quite convinced by your work that yes, you can definitely take the approach that, you know, cosmopolitan discourses or a process of cosmopolitization takes the form of accumulating different signs of transnationalism that are particularly prevalent amongst globally mobile upper middle or middle classes at this particular moment in time. But I'm also interested by some of the data that you have. So for instance, one of your, I think it was in the paper that you sent me, one of your research participants talked about wanting their child to become a global person. And I thought I have one question: what does that mean? But you know, in two senses, what is a global person? But also, what does it mean to have a project, right, for your family to become global? What does it bring about? And I think actually there we're entering some Durkheimian territory with what are the kind of cultural codes or moral codes that would string together a kind of not just a simply global citizenship, I am a global person type of thing, but also transnational fields that are connected in some way by an outlook that perhaps tries to connect people in new ways. Maybe in the wrong ways, of course, but I think that the question that I wanted to know when I read that was, what does that mean? And you know, it's also something that might, you know, if we were to ask the research participant, they might have a very utilitarian answer that fits with Bourdieu's theoretical framework, but there might be something more there too. I expect actually that the project of becoming a kind of cosmopolitan global person expands beyond just simply finding oneself in another class position, although perhaps I'm wrong. I also, part of doing this work also is about moving around a lot. And so one obviously then thinks about, well, what does it mean to me, to have these types of conversations and whatnot. And I think that I'm not just, learning languages and whatnot, going to different places, engaging with new people, out of a desire to be part of a kind of transnational social class, although that's also perhaps something that has happened over the course of, my career over the last 10 years, but also that it means something. It's the development of a kind of curiosity that perhaps is shared more broadly. And again, I think you could critique that. What is that curiosity about and whatnot? But in any case, so I think that there's some really interesting things in this particular work that Hiroki is developing. And in terms of the field writ large, I think that the potential contribution of developing the concept of a stepwise lifestyle migration is also quite interesting. So one of the things that I think a number of people who are working within the kind of lifestyle migration approach have been thinking about over the last several years is what conceptual work does the modifier lifestyle do to the category of migration itself? Because it's really an approach that I would say is, and I don't think that I would be upsetting anyone by saying that it's kind of marginal to the field of migration writ large. Even within transnational studies, which has a really robust theoretical approach for thinking about movement between countries, that kind of takes the vantage point of global civil society and of transnational networks rather than of nation states. All of the literature that I've seen is about south to north transnationalism. So what happens actually, and there's good reasons for that, but I think that the reasons for that kind of focus on south to north also belie and reproduce some of the global inequalities that migration scholars are also interested in studying. So adding a north to south component to the frame of migration studies enables all kinds of really interesting things to pop up. The coloniality of migration systems, the concept of regimes of mobility also, which has the potential of being tied into regulation theory and thinking about historical variability and the relationship between economy, global labor force, and nation states. So these are all, of course, moving pieces, and thinking with Bourdieu of that third dimension of time, how social positions in time and global space are being reconfigured by structural transformations. The stepwise lifestyle migration, I think, can also be thought of as a kind of development of advanced forms of time-space compression, the lifestyles of global middle classes that have already lived through the 1990s and 2000s and have, gone to those kind of less risky places, and now they're ready to go somewhere more. Their projects are not just, I want to have a foreign vacation. I want my child to be a global person, and to gain this kind of these types of skills. So one of the things that I think is important in thinking about that concept, stepwise lifestyle migration, is what does it add? But also, what work are the categories doing? How do they relate back to a global, in the French sense of the word, not the globe, but globalement. That's to say the whole category of migration. These stepwise lifestyle migrations are counterpuntal to the other forms of migration that are more often the object of migration scholarship. So movement from the south to the north, which of course is more and more policed while at the same time you have these privileged forms of migration that are more and more sought after. And this leads me to another point, which is that what are the material social forces that are generating these types of transnational migration, particularly privileged transnational migration. So I've become interested in this, and my background was in political economy, so I kind of stepped on lifestyle migration by accident, and I viewed it from this kind of political economy framework. But there are also, within other subfields, interest in similar types of migration that so far haven't really dialogued very much with migration scholarship. So I think particularly of urban scholars who have dialogued more with tourism, the concept of touristification, or the work that I've done with Gilad Zaban around transnational gentrification. So I think that it's interesting to think about the intersection of these types of mobilities and a process of urbanization. And the process of urbanization, when you dig in a little bit to the urban studies scholarship, is also related to industrialization and capitalist modernity. Johor, for instance, seems, just by looking at the map, is a bit of a suburb of Singapore. And so I wonder actually what are the urban strategies of elites, and how do they go together with the aspirations of Japanese transnationals who want to gain international experience. In some ways, the woman that you mentioned, who tried to promote this region, was doing a huge service basically to landowners in this region, producing basically new higher income demand for housing. In the midst, I'm sure, as everywhere else, global housing crisis. So what does that look like from the vantage point of Johor? Of course, this might be beside your particular interest in this case, but I think it's one that the field of lifestyle migration could really use some dialogue with, because it helps to generate more insight into the counterpuntal aspects or the connectedness of privileged transnationalism and forced migration or labor migration or whatnot. So I think that's something to think with, basically. And then coming back to gender, one of the issues when we're thinking about social structural transformations that is, I think, very pertinent in Japan and also in North America is the crisis of care. And so I wonder actually what this educational lifestyle migration, which, as you point out, has a gendered pattern to it, what does it look like from the vantage point of social reproduction and the crisis of care in Japan? So I think of Micah Toyoda's work, which points out, for instance, that the state in Japan, dating back to the 1980s, has tried to promote the offshoring of retirement to lower cost countries in Southeast Asia as a way of reducing costs on the Japanese state, which I thought is really an interesting way of confronting a crisis of social reproduction. And the retirement migration that myself and others have looked at in you have North Americans going to South America, I think kind of fits within this. These are folks who know they can't afford to die in the United States, and sometimes they're very frank about that. And so they have an imaginary, which is sometimes also false, of being able to purchase the care that they need to die well in Latin America. This also, of course, intersects other current debates about end-of-life care and whatnot, but and not just end-of-life care, also, as you point out, education. So I wonder actually whether there's an opportunity not just to reflect on the gendered pattern, but how the gendered pattern is changing through this current crisis of social reproduction. Somewhere here, oh yes, is lifestyle, I have a question here, is lifestyle migration like a sign of the times? This particular case, I think really, that was one of the questions that it made me think about. Is there a kind of generalized desire to escape national political cultures and stagnated status orders that, you know, in the crisis of neoliberalism need to change, but there's nothing else beyond more neoliberalism, it seems. So what are the kind of imaginaries of escaping to elsewhere that emerge out of this? Obviously, the idea of escaping to elsewhere has existed for a long time, but I wonder actually if there are historical reasons for thinking that this is something that's happening more now amongst certain social classes. And then finally, I had some thoughts about coloniality, which is also a concept that has come into migration scholarship via lifestyle migration, and how this shows up in Japanese lifestyle migration in Malaysia. So I'm really very happy to be able to talk with you about it, because it's something that I don't actually know I don't know very much about. You mentioned in your slide on Japan in World War II that Japan was who colonized Malaysia for 3 years, which doesn't seem like a very long time. And there seems as though there's a bit of a debate also. You know, the Malay perspective, for instance, of you fought for us in World War II. I'm wondering, is that correct? Like, and how does that? What are the kind of tensions? Because there are ethnic tensions, obviously, also within Malaysia. What are the kind of discourses that lend themselves to colonial or north-south hierarchies and I don't know, remembering or maybe misremembering previous periods of history? And what kind of memory also is this in relation to Japan's own discussions about its war role in Southeast Asia? So those were some of the things that I guess I was thinking about. You know, Malaysia's place within the Southeast Asian regional economy is, I think, one of primarily providing resources to the Chinese and Japanese economies, but again, I could be wrong about that. Is coloniality an adequate concept for talking about this relationship, or talking at all about Japanese migration to Southeast Asia? And that's it.